Hey, this is the Level Up Engineering Podcast, where we talk with some of the most successful tech leaders who reveal actionable management insights that help you take your developer team to the next level. This episode was brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.
Welcome to Level Up Engineering. Today, our guest is Juan Pablo Buriticá, VP of Engineering at Splice, a fast-growing music creation platform. Good to have you here, Juan.
Thank you, Carolina. It's great to be here.
Please tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. I live in New York. I was born in Colombia. And the last 10 years, I've been working for tech companies of different industries. I've worked for a ride-sharing app. I've worked for a comics app, for an advertising platform, and most recently for a music company.
Wow, it's quite an impressive resume there. Today, our topic is something that I think many of our colleagues in the tech industry may struggle with. It's growing an engineering team and fast and adapting to the company strategy. So let's dive in and talk about what challenges do software development teams face when they scale.
Let's do it.
So what was your biggest challenge when scaling?
I'd say I had two huge challenges. The first one, of course, was finding people, and not just finding, but hiring people. The market for engineers right now is very, very competitive. When you're a small company that is venture-backed and can't compete at the same market rate at many other companies, especially in New York, you have to get very creative as far as how you not only attract candidates, but also retain them, ensure that what they're coming into is something that is worth it and rewarding work right now. Because right now we are all sort of looking for better work opportunities that make our life better, that help us grow, where we can also have an impact. So being able to create that was the first really, really complex challenge. And then the second one, what happens when you grow too fast is that many of the things that used to work when you were small no longer work. So your delivery processes, the way you do project management, the way you talk to each other, many of those structures and processes start breaking. So adapting and evolving those as you're growing fast, or as we were growing fast, was, I'd say, the second biggest problem we had to solve.
I'm seeing two things here. One of them is being in a market of a lot of software development opportunities for developers. And the other one is really creating a culture within your organization that can deliver continuously.
Yeah, I think you can say the culture is related to both. To hiring people, because you have to have at least a vision of the culture that you want to build that you can sell for the people who want to join, who you're trying to convince to join. Like, hey, look, I want to build a team that looks like this and looks like that and can do this. Is that interesting? Do you want to join and help build it? That is the first part where the culture has an impact. Then the second, when you go from 5 to 60 in a very short amount of time, relatively, or you multiply the team size by 10, it is really important that the culture vision is strong so that your processes can scale, so that you have maneuvering space to change and evolve the organization.
What are some of the steps or stages that you have to acquaint yourself with when you're growing?
So the first portion is actually for hiring people. You should really pause and design the organization that you think you're going to need. It's going to be wrong. Whatever you think you need, you're going to get it wrong. But it'll be a blueprint or a roadmap that you can try to follow along. You shouldn't just bring in people and see where they fall eventually, because that could be harmful for folks who you're bringing in. If you're building a web application, you were going to need engineers that have some sort of experience around web, whether it's backend or front end. And it's going to be very different than if you're building a mobile application, right?
Sure.
So having a blueprint of what your company needs are is important. And then creating a very light interviewing process and recruiting process that helps you gauge whether the folks who you're trying to bring in have the capabilities that you need. That isn't a burden if your process has too many steps. It requires the candidates to do things that are not standard or that are now considered outdated, like whiteboarding. Then any friction you have in that process is going to prevent candidates to apply at scale, for example. And then you also want to be able to make decisions fairly quickly. You don't want the process to hang. So very, very early on, a 3-stage process with a light technical exercise where you can gauge the knowledge and the capabilities is good enough. Be ready to have offers fairly quickly. So work with your recruiting team or your HR team as you're scaling so that the entire process is fast and that you're making it better every time, right? If you're going to hire, let's say 50 people in a year, that is like 4 per month. And you should be getting ready to not only interview well, but also onboard at scale. So getting the entire pipeline in helping anyone who comes in add so that the next person has a better experience. You set up like, hey, here's very light onboarding documentation. There's 30, 60, and 90-day plans for everyone. Here's your onboarding buddy. So someone who is going to help you understand and navigate the org and our tech stack, because there's many things that aren't documented yet. And as you find new information, add it to this document so that the next person that comes after you has a better experience. So that would be the first stage of scaling an organization, whether it's engineering or not, is designing the process by which you bring people in. You decide that they're the right people for the job, and then you set them up for success. That's the first stage. The second stage is having a really good understanding or helping everyone who joins have a good understanding of what they're going to be supposed to be doing or figuring out what they're supposed to be doing, right? What are the goals that they came in to accomplish? What should they know about the industry? What should they know about the products that they're going to build? What should they know about the stack that's already built? And what are the shortcomings? What are its benefits? And perhaps help them really, really, really ramp up so they can start taking ownership of it. I think when we're talking about product engineering organizations, it is important that we recognize that folks will make better decisions if they really understand the business and if they have actual ownership over the problems they're trying to solve. If they have visibility into the levers that the business is trying to move, whether it's the cost of acquisition or the total amount of registered users, and can understand how the product may help move those numbers. We have really great solutions that come out that are elegant and are helpful and create a better experience for users. So trying to give them as much context as possible would be the second stage. And then the third stage is evolving the organization along with the people who have joined. If you have a 5-person team, you don't have levels, you probably don't have a career paths or growth frameworks or performance review frameworks. And as you start growing, you have to start shaping these at the same time. If you let too much time pass before you put any attention to this, then it's going to hurt. People are going to feel underappreciated, like they're not growing. They may be growing, but there's probably also not going to be anything for them to compare themselves with. And they're not going to feel supported. Exactly. So I'd say that specifically for engineering organizations, the processes and the tools by which you deliver software need to grow with the team as well. They need to mature. This is the case at Splice. We used to have a one staging environment for everyone. When we were 5, it really didn't matter. People could just use it at different times and we could all test what we needed. Once you have 50, the competition for that space increases significantly. So we had to find a completely different solution. And once you've depended so much on something like a staging environment and you've built all the data into it and you've built all the tests into it, moving away from it takes a lot of effort. So you should be ready for investing in your own tooling quite a lot.
So how would you differentiate, or is there a specific difference growing from a small team of 1 or 5 people to 25 or 30, and then growing from that number to 100 people, let's say?
You're effectively growing by orders of magnitude, right? And what is important is that the foundations and the structures by which you do your work are solid. There's a really good book called Scale that talks about how organisms grow. Biological systems have already figured out how to grow by tens of orders of magnitude, by perhaps trial and error. But you can look at the patterns by which these grow, and then you see that the infrastructure and the communication channels have to scale and have to grow before anything else happens, right? You have to be able to carry nutrients or information and waste and things in and out. It's very, very similar in organizations. Organizations, I believe, are very close to organisms, and your systems have to scale. And by systems, I mean the way you communicate or you transfer information have to be scalable. So if you're a 5-person team and you're used to brainstorming in a conference room, when you're 25, that doesn't work anymore. So you either specialize, and only 5 people who are now, let's say, leaders or responsible for something are the ones who brainstorm, or you create a document where you can put your ideas and everyone can look at and brainstorm on paper, or on paper, air quotes, right? On a collaborative document where everyone can comment.
Yeah.
And that way you're gathering input and you're collaborating. It isn't as real time as you perhaps were used to, but it scales and it works, right? The purpose of brainstorming is sharing ideas and sort of refining rough wireframes that you may have to get to better solutions. If you're 50 or 100, then you probably still only want 5 or 10 or 15 people who are going to be responsible for this or who may have had experience to be able to brainstorm. But the next 80 may still want some insight into why this is happening or how you're approaching a problem. They very likely may not be responsible for whatever solution you're doing, but at some point they may have worked on something similar. It's highly likely that one of them has solved a similar problem, or that they just want to participate because we're a team.
Sure.
And so by having open processes in a space or in a team that operates with high trust, where you know that decisions are happening in an open space and people understand that their input may be ignored, and that's totally fine, that there's someone else who is responsible for making the decision and for implementing this, then those work really well. And that's just an example of one of the decision-making processes that needs to scale. But every single way of how you do business needs to grow accordingly. The way you manage projects, you may be able to handle one project in a small task tracking piece of software. When you're 25, you need something a little bit more robust. When you're 100, different teams may have to use different tools. So from one end, once you cross a threshold, what works for the individuals in the teams doing the work and what works for you as the leader who is responsible for the individuals who are doing the work is very different. At some points, you have to make decisions that serve the individuals that do the work. And at some points, you have to make decisions for yourself, for the person who is sort of in charge, let's say, or responsible for these things. Concrete example, and I'll continue with project management. When I joined, we moved from one company that offered this software to another one. I'm not going to use this as a sponsorship opportunity, but we just used a different task tracking software. And we started splitting into different projects, and it started working really well. But teams started using the same software differently. In some cases, they had different workflows. They started adapting it for their own process. And that was totally fine. At that time, they were also on different sprint schedules. So some of them had a week sprint that started on Wednesdays. Other had a 2-week sprint that started on Mondays. And that worked well when it was 2 or 3 teams, small teams. Like I could be asked about any of the work that was being done, and I would know it off the back of my head, right? It came a point where that was too much context for me to keep. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't quickly say like, oh, I'll go piece of software and look at all the tickets that are in this state and I'll know everything that is complete. Because everyone had adapted the process the same way. So that started breaking down. And it got to a point where we normalized some things. So we all said, we're all going to start our sprints on Monday and we're going to be on the same schedule. Mm-hmm. Because we're now 7 teams or 8 teams. And that allows me to know the rhythm of the organization. Everyone is moving at the same time. We don't ship every 2 weeks. We ship continuously. We do continuous integration and delivery. So that wouldn't really affect our deployments. But it helped me understand, organize the cadence or the tempo of the team. That was the first thing. And then more recently, we've started trying to be consistent on at least the states that some of the tasks are, or the way that items are estimated, so we can make the organization more observable. So I can look from the outside and say, okay, we're planning well, we're taking on too much work, we're not taking enough, without doing a lot of investigation and asking managers like, hey, how is your team doing? And hey, tech lead, tell me how much that you planned, that you finished what you said you were going to finish. Is there information missing? Do you need more? Anything? And at 100, the changes that we're doing now set us to be ready as we are more, because this is now a system that scales with the organization. So that's of another example. And then finally, because I've talked a lot, broadcasting information. So important communication about what has gone live or what is going to happen at the company in next 2 weeks. I am going to speak at a conference in Berlin and I may not be available, right? Important information that needs to be broadcasted. Those channels, you should try to set them as early as you can so you create a behavior and a culture of understanding where important communication goes and how it's delivered. This because we're in an era that all companies have real-time chats.
Sure.
And these chats are being used more and more for work. And not just, to share work, but to actively do work on chat. And that requires presence. Doing creative work or deep creative work where you're either solving a problem or implementing a bug or you're chasing down whatever semicolon, and having to keep a part of your brain focusing on the chat or whatever chatter is going on is not great. It reduces your focus, it distracts you, and it doesn't enable you to do your best work. What we've done at Splice, and even before Splice, was at a company called Ride. We agreed on a few communication guidelines or collaboration guidelines and procedures where chat is something that you can ignore for an entire week.
Wow.
And you should not feel like you had to be there. Of course, this is harder in practice to get everyone not to make decisions on the chat, or at least make decisions on the chat, but then find a way to communicate them broadly. It has been a little bit more challenging as we've grown. But yeah, these patterns of, look, you don't need to be online all the time. Maybe I do, because I'm the manager and I should at least observe what chatter is going on. But if there's something important, I'll send you an email. And my assumption is that you are eventually consistent on email. So in the next 24 hours, you would have read your email. And I know that my team, my entire organization, will be in sync in 24 hours tops.
So I find a little difference here with the chat. Even though it's instant messaging, you said somebody who is doing creative work is allowed to ignore it for a week if the need arises. But then with email, it's read it at least once in every 24 hours?
Yeah, you can start your day, read your email. You can end your day and read your email. And it is for code reviews, so pull requests. There's also an expectation engineers should 1 or twice a day support people and help them get their code out, help them get feedback on the code that they've done, because that is the work. But being on a chat in the front end channel or in the back end channel and the back and forth isn't an expectation. It of course helps, right? Having collaborations, but I have a saying that is, work chat is for gifts. You have fun, but it isn't important. It's not going to change your work. It's going to make it better, hopefully, a better experience, but it's not critical. It's not mission critical. Since most of the teams that I've led have been distributed, then that has worked really well, right? I do believe that most companies become distributed at some point, right? You don't fit in the same room or the same floor or the same office if you're growing really fast. So if you rely on communication means that scale better than talking in the corner on your way to the kitchen, then you're a lot better suited to scaling. And yeah, that's an example how you treat your communication channels from the beginning and how you onboard people onto those channels and where to find information, how to make decisions at scale, for example, is super useful whether you're 5 or 25 or 100.
How did it work for you at Splice, for example? If there is someone listening to us about to scale or is expecting to grow their team to 100 in the next couple of years, would you think it worked better for them to have all these different channels of communication thought out, for example, previous to actually scaling? Or would it suit a company better to have it grow organically with the teams and with the available tools and all that stuff?
I don't think you can plan it all ahead. My recommendation, if you're about to scale a company to 100, first I would say don't. but if you absolutely have to, you can't predict what's going to happen. You should have an idea about the types of information that people need in order to do their work. And you should have an idea about your preferred methods of sharing that information or making it available. I don't think that my approach works for everyone. It's worked well for me, but I've done it quite a couple times where I've scaled teams quickly in a distributed manner. So it comes naturally to me now. I also sometimes, folks follow me along from my past teams. So it's easy, since they already know how I work, it's easier. They help me sort of organize and influence the organization in a certain way. So it's easier to bootstrap a culture. For anyone who is listening to us who has the challenge of scaling their organization to 100 in the next couple of years, I'd say it is important to be deliberate in communication when you're scaling. The reason why I prefer distributed teams is because it forces me to be deliberate with communication and with information. I have to think about how are people going to know the goals of the company. If we share them at our town hall every week and they missed it, then I have a person who got sick perhaps, who is now completely out of sync with the company. We may not know it, right? They may have gotten sick. It's like, oh, I'm just going to take it easy. I'm not going to join the call, or I'm not going to come to the... And then suddenly we start having different states and different understandings. So by embracing the fact that my team isn't subject to these serendipitous meetings or running into other people on their way to a meeting and talking about what happened in another meeting, then I have to plan for all the information to be persistent and to be accessible and to be discoverable and for it to be broadcasted. I would start with that. If I was going to scale a team, then I would just try to understand what is important for anyone who joins this company to know to do their work. What do they need to know before they start or before I hire them? What do they need to know when they start? And then what do they need to know to do their work and become autonomous and do great work without me being the single person that is carrying the message constantly, right? How do we scale that culture and the way we work? If you think about the information that you need to disseminate before people join, why does a company exist? What is its purpose? Where are you trying to go? What aspirations do you have for the culture to become? What values do you currently embody and which ones you're working on? Is the company funded? Is it funded well? What is the business objective? What is the business model or the stage of the company? All those things are important for me to have clear and even in a very digestible manner. So I am being consistent with every single candidate that I am meeting. I like narrating a story. So I build a story for my pitch for any candidate. And then once I learn it, I know I hit, look, these are the businesses. This is how we started. Here's how we've evolved. Here's our next 2 years. Here's the folks who you'd be working with. This is why you should join us. And that story hits all the major points, and then questions usually fill the rest of the holes. When people join, they probably want to know who their teammates are. Who else is in the company who aren't their teammates, especially if it's a small 50, 100 company. You can still get an idea of who's everywhere and what they do. How their team works, how the systems that they're working on work, what they're going to be working on next, or how they onboard, how they learn, how those things. And then after you've onboarded, 6 months later, and you're really comfortable, then giving folks access to goal setting, for example, for the company. Look, every year we plan this way, or every 6 months, there's a strategy session, and here's how you can get your ideas in, or here's how you find out about what we've decided. Here's how you break down work. Here's where you come in. Here's your role. And give them enough knowledge for them to become more autonomous to shape the process and the culture of the company so it scales better.
So how do you change processes when it comes to scaling and growing? You have talked a lot about how you involve your people whenever and wherever possible in decision making, and it seems like people have a pretty good idea of what's going on in the company, but how do you change the processes as the team grows?
That is $1 million question. Like with everything we've discussed, it's relative and contextual to the size of the company that you're in, or the size of the team that you're responsible for, because it's much less friction when you're 5 or 10 than when you're 50. When you're 5 or 10, you can talk to people directly every week, and it is easier for you as a leader to repeat yourself. It's like, look, we are not using staging anymore. We're now using these deploy branches that this person created. So starting next Friday, please everyone start using it. If you have questions about how to use it, let me know. Then maybe half of them will catch on to the new branches. Then the next week is like, hey, Angelica and Freddie, you have not used the feature branches. Is there a problem? Is there something that I can, oh no, I forgot, I'm sorry, or I wasn't in the meeting, cool, how they work. And then in 2 to 3 weeks, everyone has started using them, gotten used to it, complained about using it or not. You've gotten all the hurdles out, and then that's it. The process changed and everyone is now on board. When you're 50, you're not even the person who is talking to the folks who are responsible for that work. If you use the same example, yes, you can host a staff meeting where 50 people come. And that's a very expensive meeting. Right? You can do the math, right? at a decent hourly rate. That's a really expensive meeting. And you're going to tell them, you're going to do the same. You tell, look, starting Monday, please, everyone use the feature branches instead of staging. And you only get 50% if you're lucky. Because everyone was busy that week. Everyone had to work. Everyone was... If you're 50, you have a lot of things going on now. And a lot of things to keep in mind. So the message of the feature branches occupied a much less important space that week. So you're really lucky if you got 50% of people to adapt to it. And then convincing the rest 25 and dealing with the complaints and like, oh, this is very difficult and it doesn't work in my machine, or I really like the old method. Because you're always going to get this resistance. Everyone who joins startup says, yeah, I love change, I love staying on my feet. And then you introduce the first year, it's like, oh, why is everything changing here? It's always, it's human nature, right? And it's fine. You like, when you find your stride, you don't want to change, even if it's better. You can probably do a training, but it just takes a lot longer. And that's why your role as you scale, the role of the leader is to become an expert in change management. So how you deploy a change of that magnitude of a process that impacts all these people that will eventually have an improvement requires first that you've built enough trust in the organization for them to follow along. It's like, hey, look, the reason why we need to start using feature branches is because staging isn't working for most of you. You all feel the pain. Yes, I agree. Cool. There's a couple of solutions that we can approach. We can do this or we can do that. What do you think? Oh, I really like this one. I really like that one. Okay, I've decided that we're going to go with this one. And if it doesn't work out, this is the metric by which we're going to consider it doesn't work out, then we're going to try the other solution. Nothing is going to be ideal. At 50, it's not going to work for everyone. Cool. The way we're going to deploy this is starting this Monday, 10 people are going to try it out. They're going to tell us how it worked. We're going to refine the process, and then we're going to deploy it for 20 more. How does that sound? Yeah, it's good. Oh, I want to be in the test. I want to be an early adopter of these. Oh, I'd never want to do it. Okay, you'll be the last one. Sure. This is some training material. Here's the process. You deploy it with the first 10. You see if it's working or not. If it's not working, then you try the other solution or you try a different solution. And if it worked, then these 10 people will help advocate for the solution. Like, hey, this really worked. I really enjoyed this. Some people who are not early adopters, but a little bit later, okay, let me try. I'm going to try it out. And eventually, with less effort, you have converted the entire organization to that. And that's a quick example, but that goes along with how you do code reviews. I think the key, or what we've been really successful at, is two things. One, piloting solutions for processes. Mm-hmm. So letting people try them out and report back on how it went or it didn't. When pilots are successful, deploying them across the team is much easier. And second, giving a space for people to provide input on how the solution may or may not work and may affect them. Because it may seem faster to just get everyone in a meeting that is $5,000, however many dollars you want it to be, and tell everyone, starting now, you're going to do this. And you may feel like you walked away, you gave an order, and everyone is going to do it. And then it's going to take you 2 months to get everyone to actually do it. Or you can accept that it's going to take 2 months no matter what, but you can be a lot more successful with that change if you do it in a step process, because you're also building trust with folks. People know that they have a say on how they do their own work.
I already bought it. I want to be in the early adopter group.
And that's why your job becomes being a politician, right? You just go along repeating, oh, the reason why we do this is this. This is what you should know about our company. This is why cycle time, or how long it takes us to commit to production time, is important, and why we're watching it, and why you should try to merge your pull requests in less than 36 hours, because we want to observe what friction is there. So we're going to do it. It's going to be good. It's really great. We're going to get faster. We're going to get better. You're not going to have to work more. We're just going to become more efficient. And you're not going to work weekends. You're not going to work late. We're just engineering ourselves. And that really helps.
That's amazing. Thank you. I really did buy it already. When I said, if you want to grow to 100, you said your first answer would be don't. What are some of your biggest takeaways from scaling too fast?
Before Splice, I was at a company called Ride.com. it shut down. That was the first team I had to scale really quickly. And we went from 2 to 40 in a year and a half. And I felt that was too fast. And then I joined Splice, and I remember the conversation was, look, we're not going to grow really fast. We want to be sustainable fairly quickly and profitable and this and that. And the engineering team will be at most 20 in 2 years. I'm like, great, sign me up. Because scaling an organization requires so much just work. Not work as in, not something that has a lot of output, but building a culture and building a process and building a philosophy, and just requires a lot of attention, a lot of moderation, a lot of curation, a lot of conversations with humans. And humans can be exhausting. There is insecurities, there is all these things that we bring with ourselves because we're not machines. As a leader responsible for an organization, a lot of that falls on you, right? And you may have done it twice already, and I know if I have to do it again, I may have some shortcuts, but it's going to be completely different, and it's going to be a lot of work as well. So the first takeaway I'd say is it's a lot of work. But there's usually the sayings where, like, if I knew that it was going to be so much work, then I wouldn't have done it. I don't think that's true. I think I would have still done it because it was exciting and it's very rewarding. It is equally rewarding when you get it to work well on the other end. Like right now, you have me in a podcast talking about this because I'm proud as heck of our team. But my first tip is be ready for a lot of work, a lot of repetition, a lot of communication, a lot of convincing, a lot of complaints. Humans really like complaints. And it's the way that we sometimes express what is frustrating us when we really can't pinpoint what is actually frustrating. There's a couple of folks who have followed me along for a few teams. And we have an agreement that when they complain, I'll ask, do you want me to solve this? Because if you tell me, then I will. But then you will have to go look for something else to complain. And that may be harder to solve. So we just laugh at that. But I am a person who likes complaints because it's feedback as we're growing. I've seen other leaders who really can't deal with it. So it depends. Okay, let's say first takeaway, it's going to be a lot of work. Second, balancing between people who've already done some of it or have demonstrated like in their careers that they've already solved similar challenges, whether it's managing groups of people or building specific pieces of technology, is important to balance with people who have never done it. Right? So entry level or early career, whether engineers or engineering managers, you don't want people who are too convinced that their way is the way that works all the time. Because it's a new organization and you have to shape that from the beginning. There are patterns we found, and they're now in management books like Camille's Manager's Path. I think Lara Hogan has another one that there's some patterns we've identified that are good frameworks. But just like in software, you can use React, you can use Ember, and you can use Vue, and you can get to the same outcome with a completely different path, completely different skill set. You can use Ruby and Rails and get to the same exact outcome. So there's just patterns, and you should strive to not creating a homogeneous culture, but a place where there's a learning and there's questioning and there's just a little bit more scientific approach to how you build organizations of people. It's also our responsibility to open up spaces for new people. You can't just go after senior talent.
Sure.
Because senior talent is also not going to be as excited as dealing with this bug for the 50th time. But it may be the first time a junior engineer gets to play with that, and it may be very exciting. And it is probably the first time that a senior engineer will be able to teach how they've dealt with this bug for 50 times and why it works that way. So those are just opportunities that you want to capitalize on, because it creates a richer and more resilient team that will scale much better. And I'd say the last takeaway is have fun as you do so.
That's
and
awesome.
Don't take yourself too seriously, because getting to scale organizations is not an opportunity that everyone has. I don't think that after more than a few times you're going to want to do it again, because it is, again, a lot of work. But yeah, enjoy yourself. That's what it's all about.
Thank you. It sounds like it is really exciting, and it's been a really exciting conversation. But I think our time is nearly up. So is there anything you would like to share that we haven't touched on?
I would say one for people who are in leadership positions responsible for scaling organizations, and another one for people who are in organizations that are scaling. So individual contributors or other managers, perhaps. Well, I'll start with that one. So for ICs who join companies that are scaling really fast, be patient with the people who are trying to make this work, because sometimes we can use some of that empathy that many people sort of boast about, and it's like, oh, my manager is not empathetic or my peers aren't empathetic. But I've seen a lot of sort of exasperation or frustration towards management as we're also figuring things out. So we're also human. We're also in this together. If we could get some of that support, it makes our job a little bit easier. And it's also like, we're not always in a position where we can discuss the really complex challenges we're dealing with. Sometimes, like the clown, we show up to our one-on-one with a smile painted on our face, but in the background we have like a nuclear disaster going on, and we just have to put that face, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that I would like to encourage folks. And then for leaders or people who are taking the leadership path from technical careers, we have to recognize that we're starting almost from scratch when we switch careers from building software to building organizations. And we have to devote as much time in learning about organizations and how they work and how they get better than we did when we had systems, right? When we would read about all these frameworks all the time, and we would watch 10 talks on the same JavaScript function because it was great. We have to devote the same attention, the same interest to building organization and supporting systems of people, because it is now our job and our responsibility, and that's how we get much better at it.
It sounds like the world is going to be a better place if they listen to this.
Thank you.
Thank you for this conversation. I think for sure I have learned a lot, and I hope our listeners will also learn a lot. If they would like to find you online or follow you, what would be the best place to start?
My Twitter is full of bad tweets, but they're welcome to follow me along. My last name is Burit as in Tom, IC as in cat, A. So Buritica or Buritica for those who speak Spanish. You pronounced it amazingly at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, but they can find me on Twitter. And then I haven't written in a while. I have to get back on it. But yeah, my buriti.ca is my website. It redirects right now to my Medium, where you can find a couple of things that I've written. But follow me on Twitter is probably the best and worst experience that you can get.
Awesome. Sounds great. To our listeners, be sure to follow Juan Pablo if you'd like to see more of his work. And I thank you for this insightful conversation.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the wonderful questions that helped me have those answers.
Thank you. And thanks for tuning into this episode of Level Up Engineering. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Juan Pablo Buriticá, VP of Engineering from Splice. And I am Carolina Toth, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks for staying with Level Up Engineering. If you enjoyed this podcast, so will your friends. Share this episode on your favorite social networking platform. To stay up to date with our content, follow Level Up Engineering on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or SoundCloud.